Welcome to the Fearless Females Voice podcast, where women's stories and experiences are shared in order to empower and inspire others. Before we begin the podcast, I want you to check out my free Stuck to Success quiz, which will help you discover why you're stuck, provide clarity on your next steps, and give you an immediate action plan. It takes less than 5 minutes to complete, and you can find it on my website, www.fearlessfemales.me. On this episode, I am joined by Sophia Le Page, who is a feminine embodiment coach, rebel queen, and modern mystic. Sophia has traveled the world and been on a deep journey to discover her feminine soul. Her experiences have led her to now working with women all over the world to help them connect to their feminine energy. She shares how women can work with their menstrual cycles to unlock true power and pleasure so women can be their best selves. On this episode, she talks to us about connecting with our womb, connecting to yourself and your energy, our perceptions of our periods, differences between masculine and feminine energy, and how we can use these to our advantage. This podcast was fascinating for me, and I learned so much about how women can work with their bodies rather than against them. It's perfect for those wanting to learn more about connecting to yourself on a different level. I know you're going to love the listen, so without further ado, let's get stuck in. What does being a fearless female mean to you?
Sure. So to me, being a fearless female means being fully devoted to living in alignment with my feminine energy. So what I mean by that is creating my life in such a way that I have spaciousness to connect with and feel my feminine energy, to connect with my womb, to birth through what I want to create in this world, or what wants to be created through me. That I create my work also in a way where I'm able to honor my menstrual cycle. It means for me stripping away and the layers of like tension and numbness from my body so that I can feel more open, more soft, more wild, and more juicy in my body. And it just means for me, living a life that's about pleasure and juiciness and desire and yumminess and being in my feminine energy. That's what it means for me.
I love that. That's a very unique answer. I don't think I've heard that one before. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm quite intrigued by what you said. You mentioned about connecting to your womb and the menstrual cycle as well. What do you mean by that?
So for us as women, we're cyclical creatures. Like men, they wake up in the morning, they work through their day, and then they go to sleep, they recharge, and they wake up the next day and they do it all over again. So they're cyclical also, but their cycle is 24 hours. And for us as women, our cycle is 28 days, around about roughly. So we have different stages. We go through the follicular phase where we're coming out of our bleed and we're sort of like springtime. And then we have the summer when we're ovulating and our energy's at its most fiery and we're the most magnetic and juicy. And then we have the luteal phase, which is when we're starting to wind down. It's the fall or the autumn. So we're starting to go more inward, thinking about what we're wanting to release, what we're wanting to let go of. And then we move into the time of our bleed, which is the winter, where we get to really look at what's worked over the month and what hasn't, what we're ready to let go of, what we want to rebirth into the next season with. So that's what I mean about like working with the menstrual cycle. So when we're moving through those phases in our month, that could, if you have your own business, that could look like how you show up in your business, like starting off the month, planning your creations, launching in the middle of the month, and then taking some time in the back end of your business at the end of the month. Or if you work for someone else, that might look like, planning less things, less engagements when it's time for you to bleed, and arranging to have someone take care of the kids for a day or something so that you get some alone time, or like planning all your social events at the middle of the month. So, and connecting with the womb really comes into that. Like as women in our culture, in the modern, world, we've become so disconnected from our wombs and from our menstrual cycles and from what it means to be a woman. And the womb is actually, I feel, the center of our intuition. It stores so much, it's encoded with so much information and so much energy. And so actually reconnecting with our bodies, with our, reproductive center, is a really powerful way for us to connect back to our, our deep body wisdom, and to really be able to connect more to what our mission is, what we're here for, what our purpose is, what we truly desire, what we want to create in our lives. So yeah, that's what it's about for me, basically.
That's amazing. I can't say I've heard or know much about this. So when I've learned about the menstrual cycle in school, because I think that for here in the UK, that's where we learn about it. And we learn what it is, but I have never had it broken up in that month, in that specific kind of section. And it's really interesting to hear that actually we should be doing certain things in a certain way. All I know is the mood that I'm in, or my body feeling even tired or lethargic, whatever it is at certain times. But now you're saying that, I can actually quite resonate to that, knowing that sometimes during the month I'm ready to do this, or sometimes I'm feeling in this way. And just hearing you link it back to the menstrual cycle is really interesting, because I'm thinking it's kind of having like a light bulb moment in my head right now when you're speaking. So how did you discover that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think in the last probably 4 or 5 years, I started working with tantra, and also just a lot more feminine embodiment practices. So I live in Bali in Indonesia, which is sort of like this mecca for tantra and sacred sexuality and like feminine embodiment. So I started meeting a lot of women who were doing this and had been doing this. And I was like, wow, like, how did I not know about any of this before? Because I was the same. I saw my bleed as like the most annoying thing. And like, I was always trying to figure out how I could just power through. And so I started to learn about it. And I had also had a lot of issues in my life with irregular periods and heavy bleeding and like a lot of cramps and things like that. And like it's crazy mood fluctuations. And when I really started to connect into the menstrual cycle and understand how to work with it, what I found was a lot of that went away. And what I found also was my mood changed quite a lot. So now I really look forward to when it's my bleed time. And I work for myself, and I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a coach. So I actually block off the week when I'm like bleeding and I don't see clients then, and I'm like, this is my time for me. And so I really I rest a lot. And what I find is that because I take that time, the rest of the month I have so much more energy than before, when I used to just be trying to power through all of the time.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So I didn't actually know that. So during the however long, 3 to 7 days, whatever it is during the bleed, you're supposed to just rest and conserve your energy?
Well, I mean, it depends. Like, ideally, you would take at least the first day, 1 to 2 days away from, work. You could do something, like that feels chill. Like if you, work that you get to lie down for, like you get to be in the bed, you get to do whatever. I'll still do some work things, but it's really more about creating more spaciousness, because at that time of the month, as women, our auric field, our electromagnetic field expands to 10 times what it normally is. So this is why when you're bleeding, you feel so sensitive. Like sometimes I say it's like you feel like you have no skin, it's like, oh, all my insides are on my outsides. So our auric field is so expanded, and therefore the veil is so thin. So between spirit and us, between spirit and soul, is so thin that we can get some really powerful insights and downloads and realizations, and do a lot of like deep healing work for ourselves in that time, if we create space. So however that looks, not everyone every woman is able to take a week off, a full week off. But if you can take 1 or 2 days or carve out time in the evening or whatever to have some of that spaciousness, it makes such a huge difference.
Wow, it sounds like there's some really big benefits there from doing this work. Something, again, which is quite eye-opening for me, because I've never heard of this. I didn't know that this whole embodiment of work existed.
Yeah.
And this is a part of your feminine embodiment coaching that you do?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I work with women to help them connect more to their feminine energy. So I find that a lot of the world as it is today, it's very much masculine energy. Like women are sort of expected to not be emotional, to be really calm, to work and grind and do all this kind of stuff. So a lot of women feel really disconnected from their feminine energy and essence, and they also see their feminine energy as kind of weak, and so they step away from it. But what happens is then they get really tired, they get really drained, they feel like they're hustling and things aren't working as well in their life as they would like it to be. So I help women reconnect with their bodies and their pleasure and their wombs, and sort of like become more receptive and therefore more magnetic, because feminine energy is receptive energy and it's very magnetic. So when we're connected more in with our feminine energy, we become more magnetic, which means we actually get to do less to receive what we truly want. So we don't have to work as hard in the doing. Obviously, we still got to do some things. We can't just like lie around all day and do nothing. But there is definitely like we get to be spend a lot more time in focusing on how we're being and being an energetic match and in alignment for what it is that we desire. So that's what I help women to do. And part of that is working with their menstrual cycles.
And how can that actually help? So being in touch with your feminine energy, really elevating your feminine energy, what can that do?
Sure. So it makes you, way more magnetic. So I also work with sexual energy. I have a background in Kundalini yoga. So our sexual energy is our life force energy. It's our creative energy. So the more that we work with our feminine energy, what happens is we stop being so rigid. We stop being so closed. We start to open more. Our energy softens. It becomes more of an invitation. And we also become more radiant. So, when a woman walks into a room and you're like, who is that? And it can have nothing, like they might, not about what they're wearing. It's not about what they look like, but there's just something about them that you're like, wow, I want to know who you are. So that's a woman who is truly connected to her feminine essence and energy, and she is radiating that energy out. She has this kind of juiciness, this invitation, this like you feel drawn towards her. So that's what our feminine energy can do. And then if you have that kind of energy, then of course, like more opportunities open up for you. You're also becoming more connected to spirit or soul, so the divine or God or whatever you want to call it. And so you're able to receive like more clear intuition on what is the aligned action to take in any given moment. So it's like you're co-creating with the universe instead of trying to do it all yourself, which is the masculine, just get it done. So life becomes more of a co-creation. And so that can mean that your actions the action that you're taking is aligned, so it's getting you towards your goal, maybe in a more strange way than what you might have thought it would be, but in a much more easeful, pleasurable kind of way. So I feel like connecting more with your feminine energy allows you to actually experience more pleasure in your life in general as you're getting towards whatever it is that you want to create, whether it's beautiful relationship or more money in your business or whatever it is.
And it's interesting you said that about the energy piece at the beginning, because I've definitely experienced that when I've walked into a room and I'm all about energy and vibes, by the way. And I receive that from certain people, whether it's male or female. And there's a certain aura around this a person, and I'm instantly drawn. And they always say when you meet someone for the first time, but you're just connected. And it's like how I don't, and it's hard for me to even explain how that connection forms or where it's even come from, but it just happens. It's really interesting that this whole energy piece comes in and it's come from you feeling or connecting with your feminine energy. What would you say as a woman would be a good balance between the feminine and the masculine energy?
Yeah. So really for women, we want our feminine to be the leader. So we want our feminine. So our feminine is the CEO. The feminine is the visionary. It's like, I've got this great idea. This is what we're going to do. It's going to be so amazing. This is the vibe. This is the look. This is what it's all about. And then the feminine is like, so masculine, now you're going to do this task, this task, this task. So that our masculine energy is kind of like the worker. He's the one that goes and gets the things done. But the feminine energy is determining what the vision is and what the tasks are that need to be done. So the feminine energy might say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to create a new program. Like, I don't know, I just use a business example. Like, we're going to create a new program. It's going to be about pleasure and juiciness. And so what you need to do is you need to feel really pleasurable and juicy right now. So the aligned action that you're going to take right now is you're going to go and book a massage. And then the masculine's like, okay, books the massage and you go. Or it might be, and now you're going to write a post about this, or now you're going to, sit down and create something. So it's like the feminine is directing the action, rather than if our masculine was in charge, he'd be like, okay, so we're going to create a program about pleasure and juiciness. Now sit down in front of your computer for 3 hours and write out every single step of what it means to be pleasurable and juicy. And you don't get to take a break because we need to get this done by 3:00. So it's like, it seems like the logical thing to do, but it's not honoring in any way to what is actually needed for the body to be in a space where that transmission can truly come through in a juicy and aligned way.
I love the words that you're using, juicy and pleasurable. For me, I'm just like, oh, sounds great. And why do you think it is that women tend to lose their feminine energy?
I think that honestly, our whole society doesn't support it. So I think that we're actually never taught about it. I remember, when I first got my first period, and I'd learn about at school what it was about, but my mother never sat me down and said, hey, oh my God, this is going to happen for you. And this is a really powerful time. And this is what the gifts of this are. It was more like, oh, okay, you got your period. Here's a pad, there was no education around what it actually means. I think that there's, in our world, with the feminism, it was kind of like the feminist movement was like, hey, we don't have the same rights as men, so we need to go and do what men do and prove that we are equal to men and we're the same as men. So instead of going, hey, we're powerful as women, let's go into the world and use our feminine power to show what we can do, they were like, no, we have to compete like men in a man's world. So it was sort of like the way that the message has been, the way to be powerful as a woman is to push all your feminine energy aside. But that doesn't actually work. It just leads women to feeling stressed and burned out. And of course, women have done super amazing things in this world and got to really high level positions, but it also has had a massive cost to their feminine energy and how they feel in their bodies and their juiciness and aliveness and their pleasure.
It's interesting you're saying that, because I see that in the workplace often, of how women are not wanting to cry or let out their emotions because they think that the male colleagues will think a certain way of them, or they have to dominate the room or speak louder or be more aggressive to gain the attention of a room filled with men. And it's really interesting you say that, because I can see in society how we would then lose touch of our feminine energy through all of this external factors and conditioning that we're experiencing. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I know you also say that you are a rebel queen. And I have never heard of this term before. So when I saw that, I was thinking, I need to know, what does a rebel queen do?
Sure. So what I see a rebel queen as is a rebel queen is a woman who is a true queen, as in she understands her power. She's grounded in her feminine energy. And then she goes her own way. So she's not trying to fit into the crowd. She's not trying to please everyone. She's not trying to fit in a box. She's like forging her own path that's unique and aligned to her. So for me, the essence of a rebel queen is a woman who is gracefully aligned with her highest purpose and mission. And she's kind of like just cheekily, gracefully, flirtatiously just going out there and doing her own thing and just breaking the rules in the most like sort of like awesome way that everyone's just like, oh, look at her break those rules. Nobody's angry. Everyone's just like, oh, how can I join this party? So to me, that's what the rebel queen is.
And would you say you're a rebel queen?
Yeah, for sure.
And how did you develop that? Because there's a lot of things involved in being a rebel queen, and it sounds like some incredible things there. So how did you actually come to that?
Yeah, so well, the name itself came to me actually during an amazing lovemaking session with my husband, which is a very rebel queen way, I feel like, for it to come. When I was like really, dissolved open to consciousness, and it came through. But really, it's been a culmination of my life. So I started out life very much of like trying to be the good girl, like play by all the rules, do all the things, tick all the boxes. And I was extremely aware of feeling safe with people. So I would make sure to, not say anything that could get anyone be mad at me. So I was all the time just trying to people please. And I did that all the way through my life up until I was around about 30, when I kind of cracked under the pressure of being this perfect good girl and trying to uphold this image. And I was married and I had an affair, and I ended up getting a divorce. And it was like my whole world, this whole image, this whole thing I'd set up about who I was crumbled. And many of the people that had been, did not want to be friends with me or around me anymore at that point. And it really caused me to question how I had got myself to that point, because I'd been also sort of that type of person that would be like, oh, I would never do something like that. So I had a lot of judgments around people. I had a lot of judgments around myself. And when my sort of world imploded, I was like, wow, like, how did this happen? I really need to figure out who I am, because I actually have no idea. And so that journey of discovering who I truly was also a journey of kind of like stepping out of every box that I had put myself into. And what I realized was, although having an affair is not the path that I would choose now of how to, move out of something that isn't working for you, at that time, I didn't know how to do it any other way. But what I realized is that when we put ourselves into boxes and we insist on being in them, at some point, something explodes. So we either can consciously start to release ourselves from those boxes, or we can wait till, the volcano erupts. And I waited until the volcano erupted. So for me, I feel like this is why it's so important for women to come into into alignment with who they truly are, and be brave enough to, and courageous enough to step outside of a lot of what society says women should be, because it doesn't actually work for us. Our society really isn't set up to support women truly. And so I think that this is why it's so important for women to discover their own rebel queens, so that they can, from an empowered place, start living the life that's truly theirs.
I love that. And you touched on the society element, that the society isn't really set up for us women. What do you mean by that?
So for me, I mean, our society is very patriarchal. So it's very masculine focused, and it has been for thousands of years. And so, the reigning power has been mostly male. And so everything in our society, like, having a 7-day week with a 2-day weekend, working 8 hours a day, all these things are set up and perfectly great for men, but they don't really work for women if we want to truly be in alignment, with our cycles or whatever. It's like what's valued, hard work, discipline, being non-emotional, logic, structure, science, like all these kinds of things are very masculine things. The feminine things are energy, emotion, spirit, like cyclical living, pleasure, desire, a lot of these things that aren't really, there isn't really a space that's already existing in our usual society. So this is why we as women have this beautiful opportunity now to start creating these sorts of spaces for ourselves and start, deciding how we want to live and living it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that as well, with what's happening in society right now. And before, when you were touching on your story, you mentioned that you were living a life that wasn't really for your true self. So how I see that is, we all have our authentic self, but whether or not we choose to show it is a different story. And that all comes from the fear of judgment, as you said as well, and other elements. And we formed that almost that ego or that extra state through our society, through conditioning, through what we are told we should be. So how did you form your box? Because you said you put yourself in this specific box. How did you form that?
Yeah, I feel like it was a combination of my parents' expectations. It was things that I probably just picked up in life about what it was acceptable for a girl to do, say, or be. I think that it's almost like this unconscious thing, it's like, girls are quiet, girls are small, girls are pretty, girls are compliant, girls play nicely, girls don't cry, like they don't be loud, like all these kinds of things of like, this is a pretty girl, this is a not pretty girl, this is a girl boys like, this is not what boys like. So a lot of it, I feel like it felt like the lens of who I could be was determined by how attractive I would be to boys or men. And that was, it's like, this is going to get you a boyfriend, and this is not going to get you a boyfriend. Even I feel like from a really young age, we're being groomed into like, what is considered to be a nice kind of girl,
And what you're saying in that as well, it reminds me of when I was younger as well. And even when I'm surrounded by my female friends now, we always talk about our role as women and the expectation that we should be married by a certain age. And once we're married, we should start having kids. The question you always get asked. So when I was single, so I'm currently married, but when I was single, oh, are you dating someone? When are you going to get married? Oh, do you not want kids? And I'm just there like, I just want to live my life. Like these are the kind of things that are being thrown at us. And we also almost form this kind of expectation of, is this where we should be? If I'm 35 and I'm not married, is that okay? when someone else keeps asking, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? And these kind of things I feel condition us as women, and we're almost forming this other reality of where we are expected to be and should we be there, and doubting our authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that society now has changed or improved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are I'm 41, so when I was growing up, there was no social media, and there was and certainly no coaching industry. Like there wasn't. I feel like these days there's a lot more opportunities for women to learn about different things. So there's a huge coaching industry. There's a personal development, I feel, has taken on a much bigger stage these days. So there are lots of different ways that women can find resources. Even when I started really diving deeper into my spiritual journey, when it started when after my divorce, and I was living in London. I left London in when I was 34 I'm trying to do the math, 2015, I think 2015 I left. I felt like I needed to travel the world to find the information. Like, it wasn't readily available. I didn't feel like I could stay in London and learn the things that my soul knew I needed to learn, that I didn't even know I needed to learn yet. So I went and traveled the world. I went to India. I went to South America. I was like, finding all the gurus and the shamans and doing the mystery schools and all these plant medicine ceremonies, all these things, trying to discover and find out this wisdom and this information that now you just go on Instagram, you find someone, and then you just do it from home. So I think, yeah, it is changing a lot these days.
But your experience through the travels is priceless. So for me, I am 31 and I grew up without social media as well. So I remember, I think I had my first ever 3310 back then when I was probably 13 or 14. There was no, Wi-Fi, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. So I've grown up without it. And I'm similar to you in a sense that I did a lot of travels. And when I was traveling, it was a whole new world of self-development, personal growth and discovery. So I've definitely experienced that. And I think that for me was the best way. And women ask me now, how can I find myself? Women who are struggling, don't really know who they are, or women who haven't had the opportunity to really be alone or go out there and explore. They're kind of struggling of who they are and how to discover themselves. So how can you discover yourself? I know you said Instagram and other platforms and coaching, but without the travel and without the experience that I guess you've had.
So what I feel happens is that when we have an experience, so when you went traveling and you discovered things about yourself and you had these experiences, what it does is it sort of integrates, you embody it, it becomes embodied as wisdom, and then it becomes your transmission. So I feel that all the experiences that I've had have integrated, embodied, and become wisdom that I now is my transmission that I can share with others. So it's like if you have a grandmother who's seen the world and done all these things, and then you sit with her and you're like, hey, tell me about what's the important things about life that I need to know. And she's communicating her transmission with you. You're receiving this wisdom. You get to have an experience and embody it and integrate it without having to physically go and live the whole life she's lived. And so I think that this is how women, not every woman, some women do need to go do all the travel and all those things. And if they need to, that will be available for them, and that will be the path that they choose. But it's not better or worse, it's just different. And I think that there are, for many women, and I've done this in my business, I've hired business coaches who are further ahead than me, who've achieved the things in their business that I want to have. And so I work with them so that I can calibrate their energy so that I can speed up my growth, and then and then start manifesting on that level. And I found that to be, a beautiful way of accelerating my growth. And so I think that for women out there who are desiring to feel more in touch with themselves, but don't have the resources or the time or the energy or even perhaps the desire to travel the world, and it's certainly a lot more difficult right now, that they can get to experience that wisdom by being in the energy, in the transmission of someone who has been there and done it and experienced it and can transmit that to them.
I love that. And that makes complete sense. And I need to know a bit more about your travels, because I've been to India and also done majority of South America as well. And you said you were with the shamans at some point?
Yeah. So
what was that like for you? This is a part of your spiritual journey, right? So you said you embarked on your spiritual journey after your divorce, I believe. So I'd love to know more. What was that like?
So it was a few years later I went, but I went without really having a plan. I started in Guatemala. I had two plans. I had booked to do a 1-month mystery school initiation. And then I had booked a yoga teacher training because I thought I was going to be a yoga teacher. So I had those two things booked. But after that, I was like, I'm just going to be open. I'm going to be receptive. I'm going to see where the universe takes me, what happens. And I met this Colombian girl who had some quite powerful connections in South America, in Colombia. To like shamans and tribes that are not on the beaten path, that are kind of a bit, harder to find. And so I ended up traveling with her to Colombia and doing this incredible, and in the wilderness, this medicine retreat where all these different tribal these shamans came from different tribes. And then I met one of the shamans. And then after that time, he said to us, hey, I'm traveling to Peru. My teachers have told me I need to go and meet with all these different shamans in Peru. Do you want to come with me? And we're like, yes. So I was like, let me just pack my bag and get right over there. So he had received this, as part of this huge prophecy, and he'd received this through his teachers. And so it was a very sort of mystical kind of experience of going to all these different places in Peru. Like we had ceremonies in ancient temple ruins at midnight, and on beaches, on burial grounds, and all these like wild kind of experiences that are just, it's so hard to give words to unless you were there. And so it was like truly like one of to this day, like probably the most profound experience I've had. And like I still feel like a little emotional when I think about it, because it was like my whole world got opened to what is beyond what I can see with my physical eyes. And so I'm forever grateful for that experience. It was truly amazing.
Would you say that you've used that experience to help you throughout your life now?
Yeah, I think that it definitely, for me, I feel like when I first discovered plant medicine, I thought it was going to just be this magic pill. I just take it and then, everything's done and I'm healed overnight and hallelujah, and I move on. But what I discovered was that it more so it shows you what's possible, and it opens a doorway that you get to choose to step through. So it gives you a visceral experience of what it means to be fully aligned. So through that experience, I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to truly love myself. Oh, this is what it feels like to to feel fully alive, to feel like anything is possible. And once I had that visceral experience, then I was able to see in my day-to-day life how far from that I was. And also I had a pathway back. So then after my journeys. It was the doing the, you know, the day-to-day internal work to release whatever blocks and limits and beliefs that I had that were keeping me out of that space.
And that's helped you get to being a rebel queen.
Yeah.
I love that. And just one last thing on that. So through that experience and through your travels and through everything that you've learned, because I know you did work with gurus in India as well, how has that taken you to the path of the feminine energy, discovery around the menstrual cycle and all the benefits there? What's the link?
So it's interesting because a lot of that, the medicine work and also the work that I did in India was still very masculine focused. I feel like there's a lot of, you know, with the shamans and things, there's like a certain, the ceremony has a structure and every shaman's different, but they are like, this is the way we do it. And this is what happens here. And so it's all very ordered and structured. And of course, I mean, I feel like you're Indian, right? So, you know, like it's quite, there obviously there's all the deities, but it's also a very much of a sort of a purifying, like releasing all the attachment to the material world. Like the guru that I was working with was like, having a relationship will get in the way of your spiritual development. Like you should be single and da da da. So it was like it was sort of like quite I can't think of the word, but you know, where it's sort of like stripping everything away.
Yeah.
And sort of very disciplined, like very like, it's just you and spirit and that's it. That's all you need. And it's true, really, it's all you need. But then also there is something that's really beautiful about allowing the human experience. So actually tantra, which also comes from India, was a really beautiful, I feel like, step from moving more away from like trying to not be human to allowing the human experience and finding spirit through the human experience. And actually arriving in Bali, which has a very feminine energy. It's sort of this lush tropical kind of place. It just feels very feminine in essence. And then I actually learned a lot more about tantra here than I did in India, even though I tried to look for it there, but it didn't find it. But that sort of, I feel like it was everything in my life, it felt like was priming me for that point to be able to actually go, oh, wait, okay, all of this is great, but what about the body? What about pleasure? Like maybe it's not all about attaining perfection. Maybe it's not all about becoming pure. Maybe it's not all about like, you know, sort of ascending, and maybe it's about being human and messy and real and raw and finding the pleasure in the day-to-day experience of being a woman.
I feel that you have had such an incredible range of experiences to self-love, discovery, learning about feminine versus masculine, actually practicing it, now helping other women. I think it's absolutely incredible. Your journey is just so inspiring.
Thank you.
And so just to finish off then, how can the listeners find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's at Sophia_Le_Page, or go to my website, sophialepage.com. So I do a bunch of different things. I have a weekly feminine embodiment class, which is, I call it an erotic movement class. It's called Rebel Queen Kundalini. So we do a sort of mixture of some juicy movements. We do some breath work and we do some dancing. And I also have a Facebook group that's free. It's called the Rebel Queendom. So I'm in there every week doing a Q&A with my women. So there's like tons of ways to connect. And if you go to my website, everything is linked there.
Amazing. I'll put the links in the show notes for you as well. So for those who are interested, you can click directly from this episode. And I'd just like to end with saying thank you so much, Sophia, for coming on this podcast. I've absolutely loved this conversation. For me, I've learned a lot and it was very inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel like so honored to be your guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Don't forget, I have a free quiz for you which will help you discover how fearless you are. It identifies where you're being held back in life and will give you some tips at the end on how to improve your mindset and confidence so you are living your best life. You can take the free quiz on my website, www.fearlessfemales.me. Also, I'd love for you to do me a massive favor. If you enjoyed the podcast, then be sure to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you.